James Granahan here, recording another daily video about remote work. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about working in cafes. And the reason that this is on my mind is today in Ireland is the day that cafes are reopening again as the lockdown gradually begins to lift. So cafes have been open for weeks for takeaway, but today is the day that you can actually go in and sit down in a cafe again and have your cup of coffee there. So it was kind of on my mind because before the lockdown I spent quite a lot of time working in cafes, and I think a lot of people who work remotely like to work in cafes, and I think there's kind of some upsides and some downsides to this. I find it great because it's somewhere I can go and for short bursts of time I can sit down, and I've kind of trained myself when I go to a cafe to kind of be able to sit down, get my coffee and just lock in and go into focus mode. It's kind of become like a habit for me at this stage, and so I love working from cafes, and actually I tend to do most of my more kind of repetitive work or administrative work at home, but I love to go to cafes when I need to do something that's more creative, or when I need to kind of think, because I find that getting out of the house, going somewhere different, because I don't work in cafes that often, so I use them as a place to go when I want to go somewhere different, kind of change my mindset and do creative work, and I think they can be really great for this. So I would, if you have creative work to do as part of your remote work, I'd definitely recommend trying that out and seeing if it works for you. But there are downsides too. One of the big downsides with cafes obviously is reliability of things like internet or the ability to get plugs. So that you can actually plug in your laptop if you're working. Crazy winds here today. So I find that, cafes are a great place to work when you're in a place where you know the local area, you know the cafes, and you know where the ones are that are suitable for work. That's awesome. So for example, here in my hometown, I know all the cafes. I know which ones have plugs, I know which ones have good internet, I know which ones have a good space to sit down, so I know where I can go and sit down and get work done easily. And I also know which ones are a bit crappy and not really suited to work, where maybe you have to pay extra for Wi-Fi, or there's not that many plugs, or really noisy or whatever, or they play loud music. So you kind of get to know the right places, and I find that when you know cafes and you can rely on them, they're awesome. But cafes can be a horrible experience when you're in a new city. This has happened to me a few times. I remember a couple of years ago in particular being in Berlin one time and thinking, okay, I'm going to work from a cafe today. I'm passing through Berlin, and it was a disaster because I spent half the bloody morning going around Berlin trying to find a suitable cafe to actually sit down and work in, somewhere that had Wi-Fi and plugs, and it was open and had space, because there's a lot of kind of small cafes in Berlin. A lot of them were full up. So, the thing is, cafes are great. I think you don't want to kind of overly rely on them, but they're awesome, especially when you're looking for somewhere to go to kind of mix things up, get a different environment to work in, and do creative work. So that's my 2 cents on working remotely and working from cafes, and hope you found that interesting and useful. I'll see you back here tomorrow for another video.